In this video, we will be tasting and talking about batch 74 of the Eco-Chat Club, Eco-Farmed GABA Oolong Tea. Batch 74 of the Eco-Chat Club is an Eco-Farmed GABA Oolong Tea. And this batch of tea can be considered an anomaly type of Taiwan tea for two main reasons. One, that it is GABA, which is the name, actually, an abbreviated name of an amino acid compound naturally occurring in our nervous system that Japanese researchers discovered tea can be processed in a way to produce much higher quantities of this compound than when tea is processed in the traditional ways. So that was discovered decades ago in Japan, and the way that they were making it in Japan was originally a green tea, and it wasn't very flavorful, as the story goes at least. It actually had a kind of foul aroma to it. So they eventually called upon Taiwan Oolong tea makers to have their hand at developing a processing method that would raise this amino acid concentration and also taste good. And of course, they succeeded because they have oolong tea making skills. That compound, the GABA compound, is naturally occurring in our nervous system with the function of calming us down after a fight or flight or anxiety provoking experience. Ingesting this compound is said to have beneficial effects in the same way. In our experience, in my personal experience, it does seem to offer a clarifying but calming, clarifying mentally but calming physically sensation. It is a heavily oxidized. It can be considered fully oxidized at over 80%, although it's done with oolong tea making procedures. In other words, the leaves are not rolled to the point of tearing them and exposing the juices or sap within them. These leaves were hand-picked, so this is a very loose roll. It's kind of halfway between rolled tea and curled tea, and a nice uniform color throughout. Without further ado, I brewed 12 grams of tea leaves in a 200 milliliter Taiwan teapot for roughly 1 minute, increasing with successive brews up to maybe 2 minutes. For the fourth brew, I have 1, 2, 3, 4. And in the picture here, I have the fifth brew that I let sit for 10 minutes. So let's have a sip. Nice tangy, fruity flavor. The aroma, as I was brewing the leaves and smelling the aroma coming off the brewed leaves, it almost always reminds me of dried papaya. Somewhat tangy, and it also is combined, dry papaya combined with prunes or raisins, something a little denser. And by the third brew, I was once again reminded of, as I have been in the past when brewing this tea, of strawberry rhubarb pie. So there's this, especially in the wafting aroma coming off the steaming leaves, you get a combination of something particularly sweet, but also tangy. In the flavor profile, sweetness is much less of a factor. It's there, but it's much more of a tangy fruit flavor. I'd say tangier than papaya. Maybe stone fruit. It's hard to tell. It's just, somebody could easily say citrus as well. Bergamot, something like that. It's got a nice mouthfeel, thick. It has enough of the heavily oxidized character to give you something like caramel or not quite molasses, at least not that, it doesn't verge on smoky, it's still quite fresh. I'd say tangy is the prominent flavor note, but it's balanced by a very thick, smooth mouthfeel and enough sweetness as well. Just keep rolling here. 3. starting to mellow a little more. This one definitely is it's sweeter and less tangy. It's almost room temperature now. It's still a little bit warm. It's a very interesting flavor of tea. There's enough astringency. There's not really any bitterness. It's all kind of sweet, sour, and a little bit of dryness in the finish. But it's quite refreshing. I think it would make a great, I haven't tried it yet, not that I can remember, iced tea, especially if you use a cocktail shaker. I think it would give a really nice, complex flavor profile and bouquet. 4. Mellower yet. Still substantial in the mouthfeel. Tangy but sweet. It's getting sweeter as it goes. Whatever the tangy notes are were more pronounced in the first, second brew and slowly going down toward the fourth. Okay, I'm going to brace myself here. 5th brew, 10 minutes, much darker, much closer to a black tea color. It's making me burp. As the locals say here, if you burp after drinking tea, it's a sign of it being a good quality tea. I've heard that in many contexts. I'm not sure how to interpret that. Wow, really different. Almost no tanginess, not very sweet, very concentrated, some bitter now. I mean, I do this purposely to push it to see where it goes when it just is allowed to steep. It's not, as almost every time I'm reminded that it doesn't really bring out any of the finer qualities in the tea at all. It basically makes it concentrated to the point of losing its complexity. But it is interesting to see what it has. It's a little bit more like a black tea flavor, tannins kind of, at this very concentrated brew. Yeah, it tasted way better, the 1, 2, 3, 4, as it always does. I'm going to quickly go through 2, 3, and 4 again. It's not smoky, but there's something, that level of oxidation and the extensive processing, musky, smoky, something a little more rich and full-bodied. There's no roasting to speak of. There's just roasting them at low temperature to get all of the moisture out of the leaves. I think the GABA effect is happening now. There's a certain kind of clarity in your brain that happens when I drink this tea. It's really nice. I should mention something about the source of this tea. This is an organic tea farmer in Songbo-ling, Nantou County, Mingjian Township, Nantou County. He is a pioneer, without a doubt. He's been experimenting with natural farming methods, and he has leased plots of tea from people that no longer want to manage them, transitioned them to organic, and is really, he's the cutting edge of natural farming in many ways. He will plant new saplings and irrigate them to the point of them maturing enough to where he thinks they can survive on their own, and then he will slowly stop watering them. And this is low elevation. It's a hotter climate. It's drier. It's not an easy living environment, particularly for certain strains of tea. This is Four Seasons Spring, which is a hybrid strain that was found kind of by accident here in Taiwan, but found to be very prolific. It continued to sprout new leaf growth throughout the year, and since the late 80s has become quite popular, especially at lower to mid elevations, because Four Seasons Spring also has what they call in Chinese a wild character. It's hardier. It can withstand more natural variations in seasonal weather patterns, like dry spells and cold spells even. So it's just a heartier character of tea. It produces more than the other strains. And we've learned through this farmer that in our personal opinion, I guess, the tea, when Four Seasons Spring tea leaves are more heavily processed, like a GABA tea. He's also done medium oxidation, heavy roast oolongs, and we just think that that's when Four Seasons Spring really comes to the fore in terms of what it has to offer. It's most often found as a lightly oxidized, unroasted oolong, like a high mountain oolong tea here in Taiwan. And in that form, it has a very distinct floral character to it that's almost too much in my personal taste. I find it too prominent and too pronounced a lot of the time. With a little more oxidation, it can be mellowed, but we really have found that Four Seasons Spring shines most brightly when it's processed more heavily. And this is a perfect example. This source is also our ongoing source of machine harvested GABA Oolong tea that we have in our store on a regular basis. This is a hand-picked batch. They make 1 or 2 batches per year by hand harvesting, just to offer the best quality they can of a GABA Oolong. He has researched, he's kind of specialized in GABA tea making for the last decade really, and we do believe that he is the best GABA Oolong tea maker that we know. And we feel really happy to be able to procure his tea. It's a very large spectrum. Everybody you buy GABA from, it'll taste somewhat different, and basically people are experimenting with the processing methods, and everybody has their own take on it, so to speak. So there's a large spectrum of flavor profiles and characters of tea under the name of GABA. And we think that this way of making it really kind of offers a more a balanced and composed, or something with a more well-rounded composition. So there you have it, batch 74 of the Eco-Chateas Club, Eco-Farmed GABA Oolong Tea. Thanks for being with us, and we'll see you next time.